Dean Martin didn't shout. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't even raise his voice. Instead, he lit a cigarette and stared. For 20 seconds. In front of a packed hotel, under the glow of Vegas neon, one of the biggest stars in the world watched as his best friend, Sammy Davis Jr., was humiliated like a nobody. And then, in a moment that would never make the headlines but would ripple through history, Dean Martin did something so cool, so calm, and so dangerous that it changed the rules of the Strip forever. He didn't start a protest. He didn't call the press. He simply refused to look away until the world had to. But what triggered that silent showdown? Why did a security guard dare to block one of the greatest performers in the world from walking through the front door? And what exactly did Dean Martin say, or not say, that made a grown man crumble on the spot? This is the untold story of the stare that shattered segregation. And it all started with one wordless threat and a torn contract worth over $1 million. The 1950s sold a fantasy. Tailored tuxedos, champagne toasts, the soft glow of stage lights, and the Rat Pack's legendary swagger. On the surface, Las Vegas was the crown jewel of American nightlife, a neon playground for the rich and famous. But behind the velvet curtains, beneath the casino carpets, lay a rot that no one dared to speak of. Vegas was segregated, brutally. If you were black, it didn't matter how famous you were, how loud the applause roared, or how much your face sold tickets. When the curtain fell, so did your status. You were just another body the city didn't want seen. Sammy Davis Jr. could headline a sold-out show at the Sands Hotel, but the moment he stepped off stage, he wasn't allowed to use the lobby restroom. He couldn't gamble, couldn't eat in the main dining room, and couldn't stay in the hotel he packed with paying customers. And if he tried, security didn't ask politely. They dragged you out the back. Or worse, there were rules, unwritten, unspoken, but enforced with fists. If a black person even tried to play a slot machine, there was a real chance they end oppos, leave with broken fingers and a bloody warning. End quote. You don't belong here, end quote. But here's the sick twist. Vegas needed black performers. Desperately. The clubs wanted their voices, their rhythm, their soul. They booked Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, and above all, they booked Sammy. They used their talent, drained it, cashed it in, then tossed them out the back door like empty liquor bottles. And the audience? They clapped, they cheered, then they turned away. This was the golden age of showbiz, polished on the outside, poison at the core. But not everyone was willing to keep playing pretend. And one man, cool, calm, and impossible to ignore, was about to turn that illusion on its head. Imagine this. You just lit up the room. A standing ovation, thunderous applause, millionaires rising to their feet for you. You're the reason people flew across the country. The reason they dressed up, dropped cash, and stayed out past midnight. And yet, you can't walk through the lobby like everyone else. You can't grab a drink at the bar. You can't even use the guest restroom without starting a scene. That was Sammy Davis Jr.'s reality. Every night, after dazzling 1,000 white faces in a packed showroom, Sammy didn't get to bask in the afterglow. He got escorted out through the kitchen, past the smell of sweat, grease, and garbage. He was walked like contraband down back corridors, out to the alley, where he'd climb into a car and be driven miles away. Not to a suite, not to a dressing room, but to a boarding house on the city's segregated west side, where the streets were cracked, the lights were dim, and air conditioning was a luxury. All while Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin slept in penthouse beds with silk sheets and room service. He was the star, but treated like a liability. And it broke him. Night after night, Sammy smiled through the pain. He made people laugh, made them cry, made them feel alive, while dying a little inside himself. Because no matter how high he climbed, he always hit the same ceiling. A ceiling made not of glass, but of concrete. His fame didn't protect him. His talent didn't shield him. Offstage, he was just another black man in a city that only valued his voice, not his presence. And the worst part? Most people around him just accepted it. That's just how it is, they said. Take the money, keep your head down. But Sammy wasn't just tired. He was exhausted, spiritually, emotionally, physically. Every step through those back halls was another reminder that no matter how bright he shined, they still wanted him in the dark. And someone else saw it too. Someone who wasn't shouting about justice, but watching, quietly, carefully. A man who didn't give speeches, but had power few dared challenge. Dean Martin was watching, and when he'd seen enough, he didn't just get mad. He got dangerous. Dean Martin wasn't a protester. He didn't march. He didn't lecture. He didn't preach. Ask him about civil rights, and he'd probably crack a joke about his golf swing. But behind that sleepy smirk and ever-present glass of scotch was a man forged in fire. Dean grew up in the dirt, a poor Italian kid from Steubenville, Ohio, who didn't speak English until he was 5. He was mocked, beaten, pushed down, and pushed back harder. He boxed for $5 a night. He bootlegged liquor, dealt blackjack, took hits, gave hits, and somewhere between the steel mills and the smoke-filled backrooms, he wrote his own code. Not in words, not in laws, but in actions. Never push the little guy. Always protect your own. Dean didn't talk about racism, but he hated bullies. And to him, segregation was just that, a big, ugly bully that thought power made it right. When Dean looked at Sammy, he didn't see a cause. He saw a genius, a brother, a guy who could dance circles around anyone in the room and still leave the crowd wanting more. To Dean, Sammy wasn't, end quote, the black member of the Rat Pack, end quote. He was just Smokey. And once you were family to Dean Martin, you were untouchable. Not in the loud, chaotic way Frank Sinatra handled things, flipping tables, making threats. Dean didn't need noise. He had something more terrifying: silence. Dean's power came from presence, from a look, from knowing exactly how many chips he had and how to use them. He didn't flaunt his connections. But Vegas was run by men who answered to other men. Men who listened when Dean Martin made a phone call. When Dean protected you, it wasn't with fists. It was with leverage. And night after night, he watched his best friend, the man who shared his stage and stole every scene, be treated like trash. He saw Sammy shrink. He saw the light dim. Until finally, on a sweltering Tuesday night, Dean Martin had seen enough. He didn't throw a fit. He didn't plan a rebellion. He just lit a cigarette and walked toward the front door. The sun had dipped behind the Mojave horizon, but the heat still clung to the Las Vegas Strip like sweat on skin. It was prime time at the Sands Hotel. Cadillacs lined the drive, tourists bustled in sequin dresses and silk suits, and the casino buzzed like electricity in the air. And then, Sammy Davis Jr. pulled up to the front entrance. Normally, he wooed and Oppos, T. Normally, he and Oppos, D take the back, because that's what they expected. That's what kept the peace. But not tonight. Tonight, he was tired. Tired of the shame. Tired of sneaking in like contraband while his name lit up the marquee. He just wanted to walk through the front door like a man. So he adjusted his tuxedo, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward. 3 steps from the door, he was stopped cold. A massive hand slammed into his chest. Not a greeting. A wall. Not here, Sammy. The voice belonged to Kowalski, a security guard built like a vending machine and just as warm. He didn't whisper. He wanted the crowd to hear. You know the rules. Around back. Sammy froze. He could see the golden lobby lights dancing off the marble floors. He could hear laughter, music, clinking glasses. It was right there. But suddenly, he wasn't a headliner. He wasn't a legend. He was just help. I'm headlining tonight, Sammy said, barely above a whisper. My name's on the sign. I just want to go to my room. Kowalski didn't budge. Doesn't matter. Rules are rules. Don't make a scene. And that's when it happened. The shift. Another car rolled up. A black limousine. The door opened with a slow creak, and a cloud of cigarette smoke drifted out like a warning. Dean Martin had arrived. Tuxedo half untied, steps slow and steady. He looked like he'd just rolled out of a dream. But his eyes were sharp. He saw everything. He saw Sammy's shame. He saw the guard smirk. He saw the line in the sand. Dean didn't speak. He didn't raise a hand. He just walked. One slow step at a time, toward the man who thought he had power. Toward the man who had no idea what kind of storm was heading his way. And when he reached them, Dean Martin stopped, lit a cigarette, and stared. No yelling. No posturing. Just 20 seconds of silence, so loud it drowned out the entire strip. The valet stopped moving. The dice stopped clattering. Even the tourists froze, unsure of what they were witnessing. Dean's stare didn't blink, didn't twitch. It was the kind of look you give a man right before you ruin his life. And when he finally opened his mouth, he didn't roar. He whispered, "You got a hand on my friend?" The guard stammered, "And Mr. Martin, it's the policy. Management says, no colors in the lobby. I don't make the rules." Dean leaned in, the smoke curling around his words. You just enforced them. Then he reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out something worth more than the guard's entire year of pay. His $1 million contract. Folded, crisp, untouchable, until Dean tore it in half. Then again, and again, the pieces fluttered to the ground like snowflakes made of fire. Now I don't have a contract, he said calmly. So I don't sing. And if I don't sing, the casino's empty. And if the casino's empty, the bosses are going to ask why. He stepped closer, nose to nose. And when they come looking, I'll tell them it was you. Because you insulted my brother. The color drained from Kowalski's face. He looked down at the torn paper, at the lobby, at the man beside him who could end his career in a whisper. And Dean delivered the final blow. Move that hand, he said, or I'll buy this hotel tonight, just to fire you in front of your wife. The hand dropped. The door opened. And the most feared man in Las Vegas, the one who never raised his voice, won. It wasn't just a look. It was a reckoning. Dean Martin didn't yell, didn't push, didn't need to. All he did was stare. For 20 unbearable seconds. And in those 20 seconds, the hierarchy of Las Vegas shattered. He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He just let the silence thicken around him, so heavy it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. Valets froze mid-step. Tourists stopped mid-laugh. Even the neon buzz above seemed to dim, as if the city itself had gone still to watch what Dean Martin would do. He stared not at a man, but through him, through the uniform, through the title, through the illusion of authority. It was the stare of someone who knew every room in this town and owned the key to all of them. A stare that said, I've seen men like you before, and I know what happens next. Because Dean's silence wasn't empty. It was loaded, with power, with connections, with the quiet knowledge that behind him stood the mob, the press, the cash flow, the rat pack. You don't have to shout when you're the man everyone else listens to. And the most terrifying thing? Dean never looked angry. He looked disappointed, like a father watching his son make a mistake that can't be taken back. And when he finally spoke, low, gravelly, calm, it landed harder than any scream ever could. You got a hand on my friend? The threat wasn't in the words. It was in the fact that there wasn't more. No fury, no rant, just the undeniable promise that if the wrong decision was made tonight, careers would end. Casinos would fall. Lives could unravel. That was the Dean Martin nobody saw coming. Not the crooner, not the comedian, but the man with a code, and the power to enforce it without ever raising his voice. And in that moment, Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't just offended. He was elevated. For the first time, he didn't have to bow, beg, or apologize for existing. He stood beside a man who made the world stop to listen without saying a word. The door swung open, and the world would never forget what happened next. The glass doors swung open with a quiet whoosh. And the moment Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. stepped inside, the Sands Hotel stopped breathing. The room didn't just quiet. It died. No dice clattering. No slot machines ringing. No laughter or buzz from the cocktail bars. Just silence. Stunned, frozen silence. Because what walked in wasn't just two men. It was a revolution in tuxedos. Dean Martin didn't flinch. Didn't slow down. He strode across that red carpet like he owned the building. Because in that moment, he did. With one arm looped gently through Sammy's, Dean was calm, casual, even smiling. He nodded to guests like it was any other night. Evening. Hello, darling. As if everything was normal. As if Sammy belonged. Because in Dean's world, he did. But Sammy? He could feel it. The heat of every pair of eyes burning into his back. The shock on the faces of fur-wrapped women. The silent rage behind the eyes of men who had never seen this before and didn't like it one bit. Every step felt like a battle. Not just against the stairs, but against everything he'd ever been told he wasn't allowed to be. This wasn't just a stroll through the lobby. It was a march against decades of rules. He kept his chin up, his pace steady. But inside, he was walking a tightrope strung over years of humiliation. And Dean didn't let go. He walked beside Sammy, arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder, as if daring the whole damn city to say something. And when they reached the entrance to the Copa room, the main showroom, the tension tightened once more. Luigi, the maitre d', turned ghost white when he saw them coming. He liked Sammy, admired him even, but his voice trembled with fear. Mr. Martin, I can't seat you both in the main room. The owners. Dean leaned in, Calm. Friendly. Deadly. Luigi, you still got that booth under the chandelier? Best seat in the house. Why yes, but... Good, Dean said, slipping a crisp $100 into his pocket. That's where we're sitting. 2 steaks. Rare. And a bottle of the good stuff. And then came the kicker. If anyone's got a problem with it, they can come talk to me. Luigi looked at Dean, looked at Sammy, then looked at every face in the room watching from behind their martinis. And he seated them, center booth, under the lights, in full view. And for the first time in the Sands Hotel's history, a black man sat like royalty, because his brother refused to let him be treated like less. They were barely 3 bites into their steaks when he showed up. The hotel manager, nervous, red-faced, sweating through his collar, stormed across the room like a man chasing a disaster he couldn't contain. He didn't look at Sammy. He couldn't. He went straight to Dean, voice low, hands wringing like a coward trying to whisper away a bomb. Mr. Martin, please. You can't have him here. You know the policy. Dean didn't even look up from his menu. Hello, Jack. You recommend the veal tonight? The manager leaned in, his whisper rising to a panicked hiss. Dean, be serious. We've got guests from Mississippi here. High rollers. They're threatening to leave. They say if he stays. Dean gently set the menu down. And just like that, the temperature at the table dropped by 20 degrees. His smile vanished. His eyes sharpened. And when he spoke, it wasn't Dean Martin the crooner. It was Dean Martin, the storm. Let them leave. What? I said pack their bags. Call them a cab. They can take their wallets and their racism somewhere else. The manager paled. Dean, those men spend thousands. They're whales. Dean stood up. Slowly. Powerfully. The hush in the room thickened. No one said a word. No one breathed. Jack, he said, loud enough for half the room to hear. I bring more money into this casino in one weekend than those whales do in a year. People come here for one reason. To see us. The Rat Pack. And the Rat Pack is a package deal. He turned to Sammy, who sat quietly, eyes down, trying to shrink into the linen tablecloth. Dean pointed at him. If Sammy goes, I go. If I go, Frank goes. If Frank goes, Joey goes. We all walk. Tonight. Across the street to the dunes. And we'll tell the newspapers why. The manager's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. He wasn't looking at a singer anymore. He was looking at a reckoning in a tuxedo. And Dean wasn't done twisting the knife. Oh, and Jack, one more thing. He leaned in close, voice now low enough to cut. I heard a rumor. Hotel might be up for sale. You push me tonight. I might just buy the damn place. And the first thing I'll do. He looked him dead in the eye. Fire you. Then put Sammy in charge. The silence stretched. The manager swallowed hard. He glanced toward the bar, at the outraged southern guests. He looked around the room, at the quiet, watching crowd. He did the math, and it wasn't even close. Enjoy your dinner, gentlemen, he whispered, turning on his heel and vanishing into the crowd. Dean sat back down, poured a glass of wine, slid it across the table to Sammy with a wink. See, he said, grinning again. Easy. Now pass the salt, pal. That night, a steak dinner became a revolution. Not with chants, not with marches, not with headlines, but with a stare, a torn contract, and 2 men walking side by side into the fire. Dean Martin didn't make a speech. He didn't threaten lawsuits or demand policy change. He just acted, in a way no one could ignore. And in doing so, he shattered something bigger than a casino rule. He shattered the illusion that segregation in Las Vegas was unbreakable. Because here's what happened after that night. The whispers started. The hotel staff talked. The casino bosses grumbled, but they didn't challenge him. And more importantly, the line in the sand faded. Black performers started being seen, not just heard. The back doors started closing, and the front doors opened a little wider. All because one man decided that his brother's dignity mattered more than his paycheck. Dean Martin didn't just protect Sammy. He changed the rules of the game. And Sammy? He never forgot. Years later, he would write, "The world loved Frank Sinatra, but they feared him. The world loved Dean Martin, and they wanted to be him. Dean was the brother I never had. He was the only man who looked at me and didn't see a color. He just saw Sammy." That night at the Sands wasn't about contracts or concerts. It was about something far rarer in showbiz or anywhere else. Real loyalty. Unshakable. Unspoken. Unbreakable. And that's why, long after the neon burns out, long after the crowds are gone, Dean Martin will always be remembered not just as the king of cool, but as the man who quietly burned segregation to the ground, with a stare, a smile, and a steak.